I'm wearing this hat today because this is a 5e sort of video. It's not really, but I rarely wear this hat, and it's still a nice hat, and it's got many things on it. But, you know, don't panic. We're still mostly talking about Pathfinder here, if that was a worry for you. Anyway, story time! A few years ago, I introduced some friends to D&D. This was during the home times, if you catch my meaning, before the OGL stuff. It was great! And after running Horde of the Dragon Queen, I started running another game in my homebrew world, but on a new continent I created for them. It was a silly place, with many locations, in some ways inspired by the players. One of them wore a lot of black and was kind of dramatic. Not anywhere near as dramatic as we made him out to be, but that's just kind of the vibe, and so there's this whole city of shadows with a bunch of powerful people called the Edgelords. Again, very, very silly. Some of the places were tongue-in-cheek references and things like that, but it was just a bit of fun, really. Though there was a couple of locations that didn't quite fall into these categories that I also added, and one of them was called Fallacy. This was some manner of ghost town, mysterious location, supposedly abandoned for decades, and no one had ever really gone to figure out why it was kind of hard to get to. There were the ruins of a fleet of ships nearby that was maybe related, but that's how it remained for a while. I didn't know exactly what was going on there. I would figure it out when a party was actually going to be going there or going close or something like that, or it felt relevant to a story. Then a couple of years later, I was watching through Monster of the Week on Dungeon Jad's channel, and he talked about a creature called the False Hydra. And I suddenly knew what was going to be in that town. Now, if you don't know what a False Hydra is, I would suggest watching that video. I'll put it up on the thingy somewhere. It's very good, and in general, all the Monster of the Week videos are lots of inspiration there. I'm not going to give too much information on what a False Hydra is here, and going to assume you know, which is one of the issues with it, huh? But either way, I now had an entity in that town for the future. And if you happen to be one of my players who's watching this, stop here, because I'm probably going to try and run something for you in the near future. And if you happen to be another player who is intrigued but thinks maybe this is something a DM would try if it's kind of spooky horror related, I don't want to say click off the video, but you know, continue at your own risk. After this, I didn't run D&D for a while anyway, and I moved over to Pathfinder, but I would eventually return. I had one campaign I wanted to finish that I couldn't easily convert over. It's a lot of magic, a lot of spellcasting, and that gets a bit complicated. So I decided I'd finish this one, and then that would likely be it. Unless I round up running one of the many third-party books that I'd backed and not yet run, but that's for the future. Anyway, stuff happened, and eventually we got to a point where it made sense for the party to go to Fallacy, and I'd finally get to use the False Hydra. But this was a couple of years later, and I'd seen the shorts and the videos about why False Hydras don't work, etc, etc, and I understood the reasoning, but I still wanted to give it a shot for a number of reasons. For one, I still think it's a cool concept, and I wanted to give it my own spin. Two, I run a lot of horror-themed games as well as Pathfinder. Call of Cthulhu, Mothership, Magnus Archives TTRPG recently, so I wanted to give it a shot from that angle and see how that would go in 5e as well. I've done that kind of thing before, and obviously it's not quite as suited as systems that are built for that, but it can still be a lot of fun. And then three, there were a number of circumstances that I had a feeling would make this work rather well. So, let's talk about those. False Hydras are a very cool idea conceptually, but harder to execute for a number of reasons. If the players already know about them, you have to be very careful with what you say, or they will immediately catch on. Note, that's okay if they are good at keeping their knowledge as a player and a character separate, and they don't immediately shout it out to all the other players, but sometimes that's too much to ask. It's hard to play with memory in this medium rather than in a TV show, film, or book where we are working with a much longer form sort of content. It's a game, but you get the idea, and people are capable of just forgetting things themselves without any assistance from a monster week to week. And even if people are making notes and remember things correctly, how do you let people know that they've just flat out forgotten something without just telling them that they have forgotten something and immediately realise something's up? And then, if they know about a False Hydra, maybe leap to that conclusion as well. So, let's talk about that. Here are the 5 things I did to run a successful, if I do say so myself, but my players did too, I promise, False Hydra encounter. Number 1. Player count. Going into this period of time, I knew many people were going to be busy. I have quite a large group, 7 for this game. Okay, that's a very large group, but one of them was already going to be busy for the foreseeable future, planning various personal things, and so wouldn't be about. They were also kind of the most switched on and knowledgeable character about a lot of stuff, so that helped with them being out of the picture entirely. Okay, that's 6. Then I knew that after a week, another one of them would be busy getting ready for some other personal stuff, and then the week after that, 2 more of them would be travelling down for said personal event stuff and would not be able to make the session. So that means our first session, we're all into town with 6. Next week they're 5. Week after, they're 3. Usually grounds for cancellation, but not this time. Perhaps you can see where we're going with this. Smaller groups make things more personal, better for spooky sessions for sure, and less people to catch on. Plus the whole disappearing and no memory thing, which brings us to number 2. Messing with player expectations. In our sessions, we sometimes will be missing a player or 2. It just happens, it's something everyone is used to, and it's something that's usually explained away at the start of a session, or they act as an NPC, depending on the situation. So when players were unavailable, in this case I said, and you remember you left so-and-so with the cart and the camels you brought. I'd usually put these in at the start of a session, but this time I didn't. I would casually mention it towards the middle of the sessions, as if I'd just remembered to mention it, and the rest of the remaining players would nod along. Yeah, that makes sense. But of course that isn't what actually happened. They had been taken and forgotten. We'll come to how that panned out later, but this method worked perfectly. When the False Hydra was finally encountered, the rest of the party was down in the caverns below the town, trapped by it. We'll come back to that. And then it dawned on them, of course, the others hadn't taken the cart back to the previous town they'd been at. Or why would the other members of the party wait at the tavern when it was one of them who were looking for this item that we came to this town for? It worked perfectly, honestly, better than I hoped it even would. Granted, difficult to set up with this specific line of diminishing players, but if you can put it off, you can get some great reactions. Number 3, just generally making it uncomfortable and unnerving in general. This one may be for me, liking my horror TTRPGs, but I definitely added to the little town that feels very off somehow beyond just people having forgotten someone. On their way into town, one rolled a very high perception check and could hear faint singing on the wind. Ominous, weird, and one of them, with this plus how strange the people in the town were acting, clocked pretty quickly that this might be a False Hydra, but they kept it to themselves and just messaged me being like, ooh, I think I maybe know what this is. So I was a little worried at this point that I'd overplayed my hand, but she kept it to herself and no one else had clocked on yet. She'd done a one-shot fairly recently with a couple of other players of mine, one of whom happened to be the one that was busy the whole time, so that worked out well. Which was unfortunate, certainly, but it's something that I thought might happen, and we'll come back to that. But even with this knowledge, the weird vanishing of other party members still went by and didn't jump out to her at all because it seemed normal, so that worked really well. But also, this general vibe meant there was also a lot of other stuff to be thinking about too. All the tavern's barrels of beer were just full of seawater. Fish were swimming up onto the beach and dying, and people were coming to collect them, just eating them as if that was a normal thing. The idea being the False Hydra had been here so long that it was really starting to mess with people's memories and perceptions of reality and normalcy, beyond just them forgetting that this thing is there. And the delivery that the goblins who were bringing some beer that they travelled along with just to have kind of as an escort, the delivery had been given out to them like 50 odd years ago. So now you've got people wondering about, well, what else is happening? Is there something with the fish? Is there something going on with time that's weird? And so if you've not got anyone who's locked on the False Hydra thing, other people are now thinking about other stuff, and that's probably distracting that person too. It's all very weird and freaky and hard to keep track of. It's all connected, but also all very distracting, if that makes sense. Number 4, don't make the Hydra the twist. This can vary. If you get very lucky and you have a party who has no idea what you're going to be throwing at them, maybe you can pull this off, but otherwise it's harder for sure. If you have a party that might figure it out, well, I had a couple of other interesting revelations that they wouldn't be expecting, no matter if they knew it was a False Hydra or not. The first was in a journal from a fisherman who used to live in the town many years ago. In his diary, it's revealed that the town's name was really Fallow by Sea, not Fallacy. So what changed that? When did it change? More questions there. Interesting stuff. Plus, 3 of the remaining players at that point were Magnus Archives listeners, so it was fun to squeeze in a mini statement kind of thing there too to add the spooks. For this, your mileage may vary, of course. I also used this moment to drop on them some more hints about where to investigate so that they would get there in a timely manner, because again, we wanted to get to there with this smaller number of players and not let things draw out too long. But the bigger twist came when they finally found the lair of the False Hydra. This variation taunted them and goaded them as they entered its domain, laughing and telling them to keep talking. It would only help it find them faster. This meant that when they finally found the lair and the item they came for, nice, they also found the rest of their party. which was honestly a great moment. None of them saw it coming until then, and as such they were in a rush because they didn't want this thing to find them. Didn't even think before severing the definitely magical chain that their allies had all been kind of wrapped through and tied up to. Turns out, the reason the False Hydra was here so long and hadn't gotten too big was because it was trapped by this chain, this magical device. And guess who just freed it? Whoops! They fell right into the trap. Of course it knew exactly where they were. It's its lair. It was just waiting until freed, and now it was free to attack. Another wonderful moment watching this dawn on their faces as this thing came out of one of the many holes of the cavern. And then combat began, which leads us to number 5. But hey, if you've got this far, please head down below and subscribe to the channel. I mostly do Pathfinder content with other bits and pieces of Call of Cthulhu and stuff like this every now and again. If that sounds interesting, yeah, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. Give a like and ring the bell and all the other things you've got to do on YouTube these days. Thanks very much. So number 5. This doesn't have to be a fight they can win. Again, this will vary group to group, and sometimes that's not going to fly with your players, and that's okay. But sometimes something can be simply too powerful. Now, could they have beaten it? Maybe, but I don't think they would have all made it out alive if they'd tried. Instead, they fought it through its sort of first phase, and then when it evolved using its mythic rules, they all decided to leg it, fleeing from the caverns and managing to get away in reasonable time. Nice. They had the item they came for, had determined the person who went missing here had died, time to get out of Dodge. And then they've reached the surface and had no idea why they were down in the old abandoned chapel. They had the item, so they must have gone down there and found it. That's great. But all the other memories were gone. Another wonderful moment to round out this session. And it's just a shame that they sent their cart and their camels back with the traders for some reason. If the danger can just be killed, it loses some of the value of the threat. And depending on your game, that might be great. It gives your party this sense of power and accomplishment, and that's awesome and can very much be what people are looking for in a 5e D&D kind of game. But anyway, players really well, and I was pretty happy that they would also like this different outcome, where they had freed this terrible thing and then forgotten about it and have now essentially left the town and maybe other towns to the False Hydra's mercy. It was a perfect kind of ending, but if it's not for you, that's okay. But it worked great here. False Hydra more as a force of nature rather than just a peculiar monster that once they figure out they go down and they kill it, job done. And that was it. It went great. It was a lot of fun to run something a little more horror themed and mysterious, and also managed to have some sessions even though the group was going to be vastly smaller than usual. Ultimately for me, this was about messing with expectations so that people either never had any real idea about what was happening regarding the monster, or so that even if they were getting some inklings, there were still things that would be in there to surprise them. And that's exactly what happened. Which is surprising, usually things never go this well for me. Were there some slight bumps in the road? Of course, like with any session of a TTRPG, but for the most part, it was fun for me and my players. At the end of the day, that's the takeaway here, I guess, isn't it? Even if none of the above suggestions feel like they would work for your group, just have a think about them, your players, and what they like, and go from there. And if that means just not running a False Hydra at all in the first place, so be it. If you really want to, I'm sure you'll find a group of players who you can run it for down the line. And that's all for this one. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you've used a False Hydra in the comments below, and leave a like if you've enjoyed the video. I promise next video we'll be back to Pathfinder, this hat will go away, but, you know, this was run through the guise of 5e, so it felt relevant. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.